In this video I'm going to show you how I made these lanterns, what it cost, and how much I make. After buying the material it was really wet, so I let it sit outside in the sun to dry. Now that the boards have dried for a few days, I'm going to plane them down to just under a ½ inch thick. I'm planing these boards down for several reasons. 1, when you get them, they're a little bit cupped. 2, I don't want them 5/8 of an inch thick. I want them just a little under a ½ inch. And 3, I want them smooth, not rough. Next, I'm going to set the saw to 5 1/4 inches wide so I can give myself a straight edge on one side of the board. They don't have to be perfect because I'm going to be cutting these down to size before I miter them. So what I'll do is look at it and pick out the best side to go against the fence. Then I'll set the fence to the size I want the lanterns, which is 4 1/2 inches. Before I miter the sides, I'm going to cut them down to length, which is 6 1/2 inches. Now I'll set my table saw to 45 degrees so I can miter the sides. I could have done this while the board was full length, but since the boards are warped and not straight, I get a much better miter when they're shorter. I'm going to cut the little windows out on my WeCreate laser. Here I'm scaling the windows where I want them, then I'll tell the machine to cut them out. Here you can see I've got the side pieces upside down in the laser, so I make sure I center the windows in between the miters. It takes about 12 minutes to cut both sides out, which is much quicker than drilling holes and cutting them out with a jigsaw. Now I'm going to measure for the plexiglass. First I'll rip the pieces to 3 1/2 inches wide. Then I'll cut them to length, which is 5 1/4 inches long. They didn't have frosted plexiglass, so I'll have to frost it myself. I'll do this by using 80 grit sandpaper on an orbital sander. If you want a more frosted look, then sand both sides of the plexiglass. I'm going to touch up some of the light spots in the windows with a marker. Now I'll glue the plexiglass to the sides with a hot melt glue gun. So I can glue the sides together properly, I had to kind of sand miters onto the plexiglass. I didn't want to miter the plexiglass before I put it on the board, so I did this with a sander afterwards. It doesn't have to be perfect, I just want to make sure they don't hit when I put the pieces together. Now I'm going to use Type Bond 3 exterior wood glue to assemble the sides. Now I'm going to use 1-inch 18 gauge brads to nail them together. I started out using a 23 gauge pinner, but they weren't holding good enough. If there's any unevenness, I'll go back to the belt sander and sand them down. One thing I did wrong that I didn't know until a few days later, I cut the parts for these one day and came back several days later to assemble them. And during that time they started to warp, so you'll see some of the miters aren't exactly tight. I've made many more of these since this video. After cutting my parts, if I don't put them together right away, I'll stack them and set a 25-pound weight on them to keep them flat until I'm ready to assemble. There are a few little dings on the sides, so I sanded them down as well. Now that they're all assembled, I'll start making the tops and the bottoms. I want the top and bottom to be about a 1/2 inch to 3/8 of an inch larger all the way around. Now I'm just checking to see how this looks and to see if this is the size I want. Now I'm going to sand these with 120 grit sandpaper. You can see here how some of the boards warped a little bit from sitting for a few days. The part I didn't get a chance to record is the second tier to the top. That piece I made the same size as the actual lantern. This is how I'm going to create a two-tier effect on the top of the lantern. Here's something I'm doing differently on future lanterns. I'm going to nail the top on from the back side so you can't see the nails. Here I'm finding the center of the board so I can drill the hole for the light. The solar lantern is about 2 7/8 of an inch round, so I'm going to use a 3-inch hole saw to cut the hole. Before I put the lantern together, I'll blow out all the dust. Here I'm using exterior wood glue to glue the top and bottom on. I'm just going to eyeball this to make sure it's even space all the way around the bottom. Now I'll use some pressure to push down on it so it'll stay in place when I flip it over. You can use a combination square to mark the outside edge of the lantern so you make sure you get your nails in the center of the board so they don't pop out the side. Now I'm making sure I didn't pop any nails out the side. You'll notice on this next one I didn't use a combination square because I'm pretty comfortable knowing where to shoot the nail. I'm going to attach the top pieces of the lantern the same way as I did the bottoms. Since this video, I've found a better way to attach the tops to the lantern. I turn it upside down and attach the top through the lantern window. I'll show you that in a future video or through a shorts video. Now I'll mark the centers of the bottoms so I can drill the hole for the 1/4 inch rod. I'm using a 1/4 inch drill bit to drill the hole. Here I'm setting them up to spray a finish on them. I wasn't sure what was going to work outside and I wanted it to dry quickly, so I used the Rust-Oleum clear satin finish. Because the cedar is so light and porous, it sucked up the finish. It turns out after about a month of being in the rain, in the sun, and being wet from watering the flowers, the finish flaked up and didn't last. I did make some of these with the same finish, and they were installed in a garden bed under a covered porch, and the finish held up fine. So I'm currently looking for an exterior wood sealer that'll hold up to the elements. Once I do find them, I'll post another video and let you know how it turns out. If you use something that you know works, leave a comment in the comment section and I'll try it out and see if it works. Because of the high humidity, it was taking a while for these to dry. So they wouldn't stick to the table, I set them on 1/4 nuts. That's why I did the bottoms first, so you wouldn't see any of the marks from the nuts. That humming you hear in the background is from a fan I have going. The day I was doing this, it was 95 degrees out and high humidity, so I needed something to cool off. I've decided not to hang these from shepherd hooks, so I'm going to use threaded rod to stick them into the ground. I'm using 1/4 threaded rods I bought from Menards, and I'm cutting them to 24 inches long. Before I installed the rods, I painted them with black paint. First thing I did was run a nut halfway down the rod and put a washer on. Then I inserted it to the lantern and installed another washer and another nut on the other end of the rod. Then I'll thread the nut about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch down. Then I'll pull the rod back through the lantern. To To make this go a little faster, I'm going to hook one end of the threaded rod into my drill. Then I'll use a wrench to hold on to the nut and start the drill. Then I'll use a socket wrench and an extension to tighten the nut. After repeating this 3 more times, I'll touch up the threaded rod with black paint. While I was making these, I had the solar lights charging in the sun so they'd be ready to go later on. I'll leave a link for them in the description. Now I'll just place them in the ground where I want them and wait for the evening to come. One lantern has about $10 worth of material in them, and I'm selling them for $40 each. If somebody purchases more than one, then I'll bring the price down, because it's easier to batch them out instead of just making one at a time.